Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning, good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And today we're going to have so much fun. You know, it's funny, my guest today is a repeat guest. I had to look, he hasn't been on since 2014. I don't know how the heck that happened, but I have so much fun chatting with this gentleman, and we're connected on social media, so, we're good buds. But, it's always fun to talk with Jason Falls. So again, Jason, welcome to the program. But we really are going to have a great time talking today. So welcome, Jason.
Thank you, Deb. It's great to be back. I'm sort of ashamed that it's been that long, but I climbed under a rock for a couple of years. So.
Well, and then COVID.
Yeah.
I'm just going to blame a lot of stuff for many years on COVID. I mean, I don't know what day of the week it is. COVID. Yeah. Haven't been out of the house. Haven't put on shoes. Yeah. COVID.
Yeah. I have a much longer beard now than I had the last time I was on COVID.
I know. I was looking at that. It's funny. The whole COVID hair thing was such a bizarre thing because we couldn't go out. And so, and the really funny thing, we're going to be talking about influence, and that's the subject. The really funny thing about it was the women that I'm connected didn't seem to care that much about COVID hair. The men seem to care more. I just thought that, and so that was interesting.
I had the unfortunate experience. I had a 15-year-old who turned 16 during the COVID year.
So driver's permit?
Yeah, well, that's coming. It's actually this week is when he's doing that. But speaking of haircuts, when his hair finally got to the point to where even he was like, Dad, I need a haircut. Everything was closed. So I cut his hair. And that was awful. I told him ahead of time, I said, look, what you have to do is just be okay with it being not perfect until the barbershop's open again. I'm not a professional stylist. I don't really know how to, it's the first time I'd ever cut hair.
Right. You were just keeping it out of his eyes.
I got it to the point to where it was decent. It was shaggy. It was a little unkempt, but it was decent. And he hated me for a month.
So hats, all sorts of things.
Yeah, hoodies. He had a hoodie on for a very long time in the middle of summer too. That was fun.
And he should have turned that. He could have been an influencer and set a whole new style.
He could have.
He missed an opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, before we really dive in, let me tell people just a little bit about you. Because like I said, it's been 2014 since you were on. So Jason Falls is an award-winning digital strategist and often thought of as a thought leader in the digital marketing space. He's the author of 3 books. The latest is Winfluence. Look, I have it. Winfluence, Reframing Influencer Marketing to Ignite Your Brand. He also hosts 2 podcasts, one also called Winfluence on Influencer Marketing, and the other is Digging Deeper about marketing strategy and creativity. He's also a regular contributor on that little thing called entrepreneur.com. So again, Jason, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and I appreciate the verbatim reading from what Mom wrote.
I know. We love these bios, and they're always so much fun. And what I love, and see, I can tell that you do a lot of these, is you have a short, succinct bio. I had one podcast guest that sent me a two-page.
Oh, no. Wow.
And so, obviously I edited it. But what we want to talk about is influence, influencers, and more importantly, Winfluence. So, let's get a little bit of definition here to start with. So what, aside from just the basic grammatical difference, is the difference between influencer and influence?
So I think the way that I've sort of framed this conversation in the book and the way that I talk about it is the mainstream media has a tendency to report on influencers and influencer marketing in a very negative light. They only really bring it up when somebody does something wrong, when some statistic comes out and says X percent of all Instagram accounts are fraudulent, et cetera. They don't really talk about the overwhelmingly good that can come out of influence marketing. And so what I think that has done is it's turned the term influencer into a bad word. It's kind of backed us into a corner. It makes business owners who maybe who don't spend their time in the marketing space, who don't think a lot about marketing, but who sort of read the headlines, they're starting to think of influencer marketing as these are people with a bunch of followers on Instagram and YouTube who are superficial, who aren't going to do anything for my business because that's how they've been portrayed.
Right.
There's a documentary on HBO called Fake Famous, and it's all about how, Nick Bilton, who's a former New York Times writer and writer for Vanity Fair now, took three, people who didn't have a lot of followers online and took one of them, agreed to do it full throttle. And he basically bought followers for this person and turned her into a fake famous person. And so when the mainstream media is producing a perception of influencers like that, and business owners who don't spend their time in the marketing bubble the way we do, thinking about and talking about marketing and business all the time online, then they're prejudiced against it. And so I was, and 80 to 90% of the influencer marketing world out there is incredibly productive and incredibly valuable for brands. That's the world that I live in every day. So I said, we've got to look at influencer marketing differently. And I think we need to change how we talk about it and how we label it. And instead of thinking about influencer marketing, which focuses on the channel, the individual, the noun, the person, we've got to start focusing on what we're trying to do. We're trying to influence an audience to take action. So if we just drop that R and say, look, I practice influence marketing, not influencer marketing, then there's a subtle shift in how you think about it.
Right.
And you think about influence from a much more broad perspective than if you put that R on the end of it. And now you're thinking YouTube, Instagram, famous people, Kardashians. But if you say I'm influence marketing, all of a sudden it's like, well, that means a lot of different things. That can mean offline influence. That can mean political lobbying. That can mean, community relations. It can mean a lot of different things. And so I just sort of said, we've got to save influencer marketing by rethinking it and reframing it a little bit differently. So that the people who aren't practicing it yet aren't biased against it.
Right. Well, and of course, it's been around forever, long before computers were ever even thought of, let alone social media and all of those various things. Because, we did what the Joneses did. Mom said, eat this because, and we, okay, and all of those various things. I'm sure back in caveman times when UGG got a better, mallet, we all went, ooh, we have to do what UGG does because we like UGG. Sure. Or the opposite would happen. We're like, oh, can't do that because we don't like UGG. And so UGG was an influencer, but he had influence over people. And I think that's one of the things that we do get caught up in is we, as you said, we think about those negatives and, every single day of our life, we are influenced to do whatever it is.
That's true. And everyone can be an influencer. Think about this. I'll say this as raise my hand and say, I'm guilty of this, or not really guilty. It's not a crime, but I've been standing behind two people having a conversation in line at the grocery store, talking about something, and it's persuaded me to either maybe go look that up when I get home, or maybe buy or try a product or something that I haven't tried before because they're talking about how, hey, I tried these new microwave meals for my kids and they were really good. So I think, well, next time I'm going to go grab some of those new microwave meals. So I've been influenced by complete strangers. We all have a degree of influence. Obviously, the core people who you influence or who influence you are your family and friends. And then there's concentric circles out. Right. And then online influencers are one of those circles. Celebrities are one of those circles. But it also could just be the people that are sitting next to you in the next cubicle at work, if you're back at work, who are saying something that you overhear on the phone. Right. So when you think about it that way, as a brand, as a business, how can you tap into this influence marketing concept where you're not going to the internet and Instagram or YouTube or TikTok or wherever? You're saying, okay, where is the audience that I want to influence and who influences them?
Right.
And if you can identify that, then you can start to think about influence marketing very strategically. And the case study that I always like to throw out there, or the example I like to throw out there, is if you are a small local business and you sell to parents or soccer moms or, people who are dads of teenagers, then probably the most effective influencer for you might be the president of the local PTA, right? Because they're going to be in front of the captive audience of people that you want to get in front of. Now, for your business, depending upon what you do, that may not be a logical path to that audience because the president of the PTA isn't someone that you buy ads with or anything like that. But at the same time, it might be that if you partner with the president of the local PTA and you provide value to the PTA from your business, they give you permission to stand up at the meetings and say a few things. And now all of a sudden you're influencing that audience. So again, and you're right, it's been around forever. I mean, the first sort of case that we point to from a marketing perspective of influence marketing or celebrity marketing is Josiah Wedgwood, who made, the Queen's pottery for Queen Charlotte in the 15th century or something like that. And so he called it the Queen's pottery. And so everybody wanted to buy it because the Queen basically ordered this style from Josiah Wedgwood. And now all of a sudden there's influence from someone famous buying a product, endorsing it to a degree. And Josiah Wedgwood making a lot of money off that. And that's been the formula for, celebrity endorsement marketing, which is a type of influencer marketing for many years. But we've just got to start thinking about it in terms of influence happens everywhere and through every type of person, not just on the internet. And I think if we look at it that way, we start to look at it in terms of word of mouth marketing. We start to look at it in terms of, again, the strategic process of communicating and persuading an audience. We're not talking about using Instagram. We're talking about communicating an audience to take action.
Right. It was funny in yesterday's Atlanta Journal-Constitution, which is the printed newspaper that is here in Atlanta. I actually subscribe. Now I don't get it on weekdays, but I get the online version. And there was a story and I had to laugh because it's exactly what we're talking about. So the headline is, your coworker's burger may influence you to eat the same, study says. And what it's talking about is if they're eating healthy, you might eat healthy. If they eat junk food, you might eat junk food. And, and then the other factor that comes into it is time. If you're eating with them, or if it's been, the study said, within 30 minutes, you're more likely to kind of follow what they did. If it's been longer than that, you're like, well, whatever. But, we've seen that obviously, for many, many years, whether it's been, the kid in the cafeteria that you get to eat the pizza, or, the celebrity who is eating something. But I just thought that was so funny that was just in yesterday's newspaper.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, if I'm a health food store or a health food restaurant, I'm capitalizing on that.
Right.
And I'm coming up with influence marketing ideas to, get my information into the business community, into the coworker sets. If I find a business that's got a lot of people in it, I'm going to do some sort of, promotion with that particular building or audience or business, because I know that that's going to potentially cause people to influence their coworkers to eat healthier. And if I'm right down the block and I'm healthier, then I can capitalize on that information.
Right. And your book talks about, I'll be Vanna again. Pick up the wrong thing. Here we go, Vanna. And so your book talks about the strategies and tactics and how you need to do this. But I was thinking as we were talking about this food thing, you are the health food store, so maybe you sponsor the local kids baseball team because they are playing baseball again, and then you provide the after game treats, and then the kids are kids. They're gonna eat whatever anybody else puts in front of them. But it's like, oh, okay, well, he's eating it, so I will eat it. But then the parents go, oh, well, hey, little Bobby liked that, little Susie liked that. So, maybe I'm going to serve it at home. And then that goes. And then of course, the ultimate word of mouth happens where mom posts on social media. And so she posts on Facebook, oh my gosh, we found this great new treat. I never thought that little Bobby would eat carrot sticks, and now he ask for them every meal.
Sure.
You know, and so that's just kind of how that all goes.
Yeah. And if you want to sort of take that concept that Deb just threw out there and put it a little bit closer to what we typically call influencer marketing, if you own that health food store and you go supply the snacks for this, you know, Little League baseball game after, you know, celebration or whatever, what looks a lot more like what we think of influencer marketing is you go to the parents and say, hey, I would love to sort of do a little, you know, teaching lesson for all of the parents of this team or in this league to show you guys how you can prepare healthy snacks that taste good and get the kids excited about it. I've got like an hour little workshop that I do. Could I come and do it at one of your all's houses and you invite the friends over? I'll do it for free. I just want to show you guys, you know, the concepts. You do that. Now, all of a sudden they're doing Instagram stories and they're taking pictures and they're inviting their girlfriends and their other parents that they know. And now all of a sudden your little store is causing people to talk about your concepts, your ideas, which is going to lead them back to you to purchase the materials for that kind of preparation. So that looks a lot more like what we think of influencer marketing, but it's really a word of mouth marketing technique that's used on and offline.
Right. Yeah. And like we said, it happens all the time. You know, but it does have that bad rap because we think of the Kardashians, we think of, you know, all these various things. And, you know, as I was doing my research, one of the things that I thought of was, you know, a influencer was created back in the 80s, I guess it was, the most interesting man in the world, right? The Dos Equis guy. You know, and I mean, and there, I knew that there were two, but there were actually three actors who portrayed the most interesting man in the world. And, you know, they were just actors. There was never a name that was given. So, you know, it wasn't that, you know, it was Roberto that you were following. It was just, he was the most interesting man. And it was, you know, silly stuff. I mean, you know, clearly, but it obviously worked because it went on for many years and spun off into other things, you know, and I mean, there's probably not a day that goes by that we don't see a meme still that has the most interesting guy in the world or some take on that. And I thought that was so funny that they created an influencer that was completely fictitious.
Well, if you really want you to blow your mind, think about this. There are companies out there that are producing CG produced influencers. So people, Instagram accounts that appear to be a human being, but it's not a human being. It's a computer generated image, computer generated videos, etc., that have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of followers. And they're sort of living this, you know, sort of made up life. It's fiction. It's really entertainment more than it is anything else. But there are a couple that have a few million followers and could potentially be used for brand partnerships, just like a real person with that many followers. So now you have the most interesting man in the world. Or I actually, on my podcast a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to somebody else about the CGI influencer thing. And I said, Kentucky Fried Chicken needs to CGI the Colonel right now. He needs to be an influencer in the world. That would be fantastic. And if you think about it from the perspective of advertising, creative, and engaging your audience, there's a whole world of amazing possibility there. If you think of it through this very narrow, you know, sort of funnel of, oh my gosh, you're lying to the public and you're pulling the wool over their eyes and this is a fake person, not a real person. Well, yeah, if you look at it that way and there's not some level of disclosure that this is a robot or this is a CGI character, then you get into some pretty gray area stuff. But I think if we look at the possibilities that we could take these personas like the Colonel, like Tony the Tiger, like the Red Bull, and turn them into basically Instagram television shows with a little influencer account. Now all of a sudden you're looking at social media and thinking, well, that could replace some forms of entertainment for people, which it kind of does anyway. So yes, we've been using these personas and these characters, Ronald McDonald, et cetera, for centuries, even at least decades. And now we have the opportunity to take that sort of concept and push it into a different realm where that character seems a little bit more real, a little bit more personable, a little bit more like me, because I also have an Instagram account. And so it's an interesting opportunity for brands to play in. Fortunately, I think right now we don't have, that I know of, any brands that are faking an influencer. And I don't think there's any that are faking it and lying about it. The people that are running these accounts are typically the CGI companies to say, look what we can do.
Right. They're showing off their tech.
But that's the next phase of it. The next phase of it is we're going to have a KFC Colonel, Harlan Sanders, is going to be an Instagram account. And you're going to think that it's Harlan Sanders interacting in the real world when it's not. And it's not an actor. It's going to be a computer animated thing. I don't know that KFC is going to do that, but it's an idea. Somebody's going to do it. And it's probably going to be fantastic entertainment.
Right. And KFC is an interesting study in all of this. And I know that, it's something that interests you. They're based in Louisville, which is where you are, and I mean, obviously they're part of the Yum brand, but, the Colonel was a real person. Now, he made himself Colonel, right? It was a total, he was not in any military branch.
He was not, but we have a thing in Kentucky called the Kentucky Colonels. It's an honorary designation presented to you by the governor. It's like someone who represents the state well.
Right.
And so
a good ambassador.
He was given a state ambassadorship at some point and named a Kentucky Colonel. He just carried the title with him. Well, I'm a Kentucky Colonel too, but I don't call myself Colonel Jason Falls.
Right. And so, he was that real person. And, obviously he passed away quite a few years ago, but it's been interesting to see how they've tweaked the brand. They had the fake Colonels for a while. I remember Jason Alexander was one. And, and none of those seemed to go over. I mean, it was like it was too fake. We looked at that and we went, no, I want the real fake, not an actor. And that was just kind of one of those things that didn't seem to work.
Yeah. And I think that's why I love the idea of a CGI Instagram version of the Colonel, because you could literally take a representation of the original Harlan Sanders and turn it into a computer animated thing. And it's much more real. And you could use his witticisms and his sayings. Obviously, everybody's going to know that's not the real Harlan Sanders. He's passed away many years ago, but it's going to be an interesting play and representation for the brand if they decide to do it.
Yeah. And they do tend to do things that are a little more edgy, but I thought it was interesting how last year they dropped the finger looking good, and I'm like, okay, but it's come back, now that we all know how to wash our hands, that came back for a while, but yeah, it's just, they play with that. I mean, and it's, the interesting thing is, you don't see the other brands that Yum owns really doing a lot of things like that. So it's, they very much still stand alone with what they do. Yeah,
that's true. And I think, at some point in the late 80s, early 90s, the sort of marketing team at Yum Brands and KFC decided, but this brand can have a personality. This brand can live a little, Taco Bell, which is also owned by Yum Brands. It has its own personality, but there's not other than the Yo Quiero Taco Bell dog.
Yeah, I was just saying the Chihuahua.
That worked for a little while, but they have never really, sort of captured this, we've got to be more than just advertising communications.
Right.
I think KFC a lot of times is we've got to be entertaining. And the brand that takes that to the next level is Burger King, of course, because they
with
go
the creepy king. Yeah. I'm sorry, he's just creepy.
What's really funny? I'll tell you a funny story. I've only told this a couple times because I don't want to get in trouble, especially around here, but I did some research, some conversation research back in the day about 10, 15 years ago. And I looked at all the restaurant brands and what people said about things. And one of the insights that I pulled out of this research was that people thought the Burger King was creepy, but the one sort of, entity from that whole world that they thought was creepier was John Schnatter, Papa John. They thought he was creepier than the Burger King Colonel.
And he's real. That's interesting.
And he's real. And what's funny is the research that we dug into, I started to analyze all the things, and it actually came down to a really interesting quirk from a communications perspective. In the commercials that he used to be in, he's no longer associated with Papa John's anymore.
He did bad things.
Yeah. But when he did commercials, he would say better ingredients, better pizza, Papa John's. But if you slowed down the video, there was this almost subconscious tick that would happen. And he would go, better ingredients, better pizza, Papa John. His head would twitch in between the two. And that little sort of subconscious characteristic made him seem like he was a record skipping. It was weird. It was like, it was, you kind of looked at it, I was like, ugh. And so I actually sent an email to I've never worked with KFC or I'm sorry, Papa John's. I've never worked with Papa John's before, but I knew some people there because I've worked in the same town. And I sent him an email and said, hey, he needs to stop the tick. If he stops the tick, it might be better.
Right.
I have no earthly idea if my email caused anything, but about a year and a half later, I saw a commercial. He wasn't doing the tick anymore. So
interesting. Yeah, that was probably just some maybe nervous habit or something he had.
But it's interesting, especially if you do public speaking or if you're ever on camera on a show like this. If you study your own sort of habits and how you do things, that the real pros, the actors and performers of the world, that's what they do. They watch themselves on tape forever and say, okay, I'm doing this little quirk here and I'm doing this little gesture there and I got to stop that. And that's how they get better and get polished. So if you're ever interested in anything like that, just watch yourself on tape and say, okay, what am I doing that's might be a little odd? And fortunately, somebody, may have been me, but somebody pointed out to him at some point that little twitch that you're doing is a little off-putting. So
interesting. Yeah, and that brings up the use of celebrities in these things, and for the most part, and your book talks about it, it doesn't really work. It's one of those things where, but obviously it's done all the time. And whether it's a created celebrity, like some little 16-year-old who has 2 million Instagram followers, I'm sorry, I don't understand that. Or, the Kardashians. I think Michael Jordan was probably one of the first big celebrity endorsers, with his tennis shoes. But, most of the time we look at those and either we don't believe that they use the product. I'm like, I'm sorry, Jennifer Aniston does not use skincare products that she could buy at Walmart. I mean, that's just, to me, it's just not believable.
You're probably right.
And she might, I mean, who knows? Or we also know, and whether again, it's the created celebrity or a real celebrity, that they've been compensated for it. And so they're just acting as they're saying, this Lincoln Continental is the greatest car in the world. I'm like, yeah, right, McConaughey, you don't drive a Lincoln either. Right. Now he actually might drive a Lincoln because they're not bad. But that I think that's one of the things that businesses think about is they think, well, we can't have someone who's perceived as being bought off, paid for, all of those various things.
And that is the reason that Michael Jordan worked, because Michael Jordan wore those damn shoes every night. Right. He helped design them. He was integrated into the whole process. And so it was very genuine for him because they were his damn shoes. It had his likeness on them. I mean, he
did make money off of them. But
he made plenty of money off of them, but we knew that there was a level of transparency and authenticity with that, because he wore them every night. He didn't wear anything else, right? He helped design them. So if you think about that from an influencer marketing perspective, even if you're just working with like local little micro and nano influencers for your business, what you really want to do is you want to start to form a relationship with these influencers over time, so that they get to know you, they get to like you, they get to trust you, and you with them as well, to the point to where when they are telling their online followings or their offline, relationships about your product or service, they're doing it from a point of authenticity. They're doing it in a very genuine, honest way. They're saying, hey, I work with this company, but I would do this otherwise, even if I didn't, because I believe in the product so much. And that's where you get the best bang for your buck in influence marketing, is when you form those relationships over time and they become something magical. I actually just yesterday interviewed the VP of marketing, Marissa Cundiff, for a company called Kenmark Eyewear, and they do frames and glasses and whatnot. And sunglasses is obviously one of their big things. Well, they reached out to the hairdresser for One Direction years ago, the boy band, and started a conversation. Wasn't really anything official. They were just like, hey, we'd love to send some product to the band or to you or whatever. And so roundabout way, the relationship grew and they became familiar with the band and the people around them and whatnot. Well, Gemma Stiles, Harry Styles' sister, was in that ecosystem, in that group of people. She happens to love sunglasses. And on her Instagram feed back then, which back then she probably didn't have nearly as many people as she does now. I think she's got like 7 million followers on Instagram. And when you Google her name, under her picture, it says Harry Styles' sister. I don't know that she does anything else. I'm sure she does. Actually, I'm about to tell you what she does, but this was a result of, anyway. So they got to know Gemma because they were in this kind of circle of friends, and she loved sunglasses. Well, they had this conversation and she started using their sunglasses on her Instagram feed. Well, fast forward a couple years of the relationship building, and now there's a Gemma Styles line of Kenmark eyewear that is, sold in, boutiques and whatnot around the world. Gemma is the co-designer, co-collaborator with Kenmark to make these things. And that's a really, again, another example of a very genuine, organic thing.
Right.
They didn't go looking for Harry Styles' sister. They didn't go looking for Gemma Stiles. They just had a relationship with someone who loved sunglasses. And over time, they grew together to form something that's profitable for both of them. And people who follow Gemma, and of course, she hands them out to her celebrity friends and whatnot now. So she's got a nice avenue to promote those things. But at the same time, even if you're working with someone who's got a couple thousand followers in your local community, if there's a real genuine back and forth in a relationship built over time, that's where you get a lot out of influence marketing, that you don't have to worry about how much you're budgeting or how much you're paying them or what the contract is, because they're going to be with you over the long haul.
Right. And you talk about that in your book about, it does take time to nurture those authentic relationships. And you also talk about the fact that when you're thinking about having someone, contacting someone, look at what they've done in the past. I mean, if it's something that glaringly they would not use, or worse, have spoken against, you don't want to go with them. But I think, that's one of the issues is so many people want it now, they want it right now, and that's why they pay for it, and unfortunately then they sometimes pay for it, and so, but I love that long-term thing. And then the fact that, it really does take time. I think if from a company perspective, there are things that you still want to have, some type of agreement with someone. We've seen companies even recently that have cut ties with their spokespeople because they've done some things that they shouldn't. I mean, there are other companies that relish the fact that, hey, this person is a little controversial. I mean, Colin Kaepernick is one of the biggest examples of that. And I mean, Nike drew a lot of flack for it, but they also sold a lot of shoes for it.
Yes, they did.
And so, but, so you want kind of those, I mean, in the biz, it's a morality clause, and so you want that agreement with them, but, you hopefully you don't have to deal with them saying, oh my gosh, either something controversial or worse, something negative about your product.
That's true. And in light of 2020 and all the things that happened with social injustice and things like that, I've actually, I interviewed a young man by the name of Patrick Janelle, who is a guy named Patrick on Instagram for my podcast. I think that episode actually comes out, tomorrow, ironically enough. It'll already be out by the time this airs, I'm sure. But at any rate, I interviewed him and he said, 2020 brought about a reverse morality clause for a lot of influencers. Right. Because they didn't want to work with companies who were going to take a stand that would oppose their own viewpoints, or they wanted an out if a company did, or if a company did something dumb.
Right.
They wanted to say,
I live in Atlanta.
yeah, exactly. You know exactly how that is. But it's like, they wanted the ability to walk away from their obligation to the brand because they didn't agree with what the brand did. So that's fair. It works both ways. We have entered an interesting time when brands are taking more of a social or political stance on certain things. And that might be comfortable for some brands. It might be uncomfortable for others. But there's a lot of influencers out there that are like, look, I take stands on issues. And if you're in my camp, then you're going to as well, or you're at least going to be associated with me. So you got to be comfortable with that.
Right.
So having those agreements in place and understanding who you're working with for that reason is very important. But I would go a step further and say you really have to get to know the content and the content creator really, really well before you engage with them, because you want you're looking at their brand, their content, their audience. You want that to be in perfect alignment with your own. Right. The farther apart they are, the less effective it's going to be.
And it comes back to, hey, they were paid to do that.
Exactly. If I am, and I work in the spirits industry, and so I can use that as an example pretty easily. So if I am a Buffalo Trace bourbon, which is, sort of rugged, power, strong, outdoors, cooking over a fire is a lot of the stuff we do. Exactly. And so we've partnered with a guy named Derek Wolf at Over the Fire Cooking for a long time. He does great recipes, shows people how to grill out really elegantly over the fire, outdoorsy, plaid, denim, that kind of powerful, strong kind of thing. That makes a ton of sense for Buffalo Trace. If I turn around and I'm working on, maybe I'm doing some cocktails. If I turn around and do cocktails with Josh Suchan, who is at Ice and Alchemy, Josh is very elegant. He's very sophisticated. His cocktails are very complex. That's not Buffalo Trace.
No.
Like, he can make a great Buffalo Trace cocktail, but it's going to be completely opposite of what the brand, the audience expects from Buffalo Trace. So he's not a great fit for us. There's other cocktail people and other bourbon influencers that work for Buffalo Trace. He's going to work better for a 1792 bourbon, which is a little bit more elegant, a little bit more super premium, etc. So you've got to make sure that your brand alignment with that influencer is as close together as they can be, if not completely overlapped. When you find that, like Derek Wolf and Over the Fire Cooking and Buffalo Trace Bourbon, it's magic, and it just keeps growing and keeps growing. His audience loves us. Our audience loves him. And it turns out to be, magic. We're now on year 4 or 5 of doing things with Derek. And it all started from, we saw his content and said, that really aligns with the brand. Let's do something with him. And it snowballed from there.
Right. And like you said, he's now tied with that. But if Buffalo Trace were to do something that he didn't like, he's at least going to voice an opinion about it.
Absolutely.
And so, that's what's interesting. And, it happens at that small level too. I mean, when the PTA woman doesn't like what what happens at the corner market, she's going to voice her opinion too, and her 200 followers might, decide, hey, we're not going to that store. And then that store goes bankrupt.
That's true.
So, and I love the little guy stories, because it does seem like they're more authentic and more real, and in your book, you talk about getting reviews and things like that. And of course there's very specific rules about getting reviews. And I had the most interesting thing happen just last week to me. I had ordered a product on Amazon. Yes, I'm one of the, the little UPS guy just stops all the time.
Oh yeah.
But it was a heating pad, one of those totally innocuous items. And couple weeks later, I got a handwritten letter from the guy who owns that company. So obviously it's a third party Amazon vendor. And he said, and call me by name, and he said, I know that you bought our product on X date. Would you mind going on Amazon and giving us a review? Now, he didn't say a good review or a positive review. So he didn't break their rules. He just said, please give me a review. He said, we're a small business. We rely on people like you and your reviews. And then he took it a step further. And I like this. He said, if you have a question or an issue, here's my email.
Wow.
And, and so I thought, okay, I mean, now, since this is what I do, I thought, okay, good for him. So I did. I wrote the Amazon review and then I sent him a note. And all I said was, hey, Ted, whatever his name was, just wanted you to know I submitted my review. I didn't say if it was positive. I didn't say if it was negative. And he responded within a couple hours. And he said, thank you so much. And he said, please let me know if there's anything else that I can do. Now I've written less than 10 reviews on Amazon. So, I mean, this is not somebody who looked through and went, oh my gosh, this is an Amazon influencer.
Right.
He just, took the time to send me a little note.
Yep.
But I thought obviously it made an impact on me. Am I probably going to buy a product from him again? I don't know. I mean, how long do heating pads last? But I thought that was a very interesting concept that small business owners can take to contact him. Now, if he'd emailed me, I probably would have ignored it.
Yep.
And I'm not sure he would have access to my email.
Right.
But obviously he had access to my address. And, but yeah, I thought that was so interesting that he did that, but he knew to follow the rules. He didn't ask for a good review or a positive review or anything like that. He just asked for a review.
Well, and he either got lucky or he knew what he was doing and Googled you, because he got someone who has influence and who has a following online. So good for him. And definitely for small business owners, that's an amazing way to get those reviews. What I talk about in the book, I think, reviews is one of the 4 main outputs that you're looking for from influencer marketing. And a lot of people ignore that one because they think, well, for Amazon, for Yelp, for Google My Business, I'm not allowed to tell people to go, I can't encourage people.
What if somebody says something bad?
Exactly. But something else that Google looks at is the reviews on your website, on your own product pages. You can control that completely.
Oh yeah. You can write them for people and say, hey,
absolutely. But think about it this way. You can also engage your influencers to say, well, I want you to post on your channels, but I also want you to give me permission to take what you post and put it on my channels and my website. And so now all of a sudden, an influencer that you've engaged and you've potentially paid or given product to, they write something fantastic about you. They take a wonderful picture or a video with your product, slap that on a product page, and all of a sudden your conversion rate's going to go up. So why wouldn't you use that? And so that's one of the 4 major outputs. There's obviously, you're going to drive, sales, or use it as an advertising channel, drive sales and whatnot, and awareness. You're going to use it from a public relations perspective to kind of build relationships, but you're also going to use it for that sort of customer response, review, ratings perspective to be able to, manufacture better reviews in the places where you can. In the places where you can't, the approach of just reaching out and asking customers to do that is a smart way to do it. And then the 4th one that I talk about in the book is word of mouth marketing, really driving word of mouth to kind of, anchor your brand.
Right. And reviews, it's so funny because we'll totally ignore ads that a company puts out. But when we see something on Facebook, Instagram, wherever, written by a total stranger, we believe it.
Yep.
And I mean, for all we know, it's a total fake. I mean, but we believe it.
Well, and there's a psychological, sort of definition for that. It's called surrogation, right? If we can't experience the product ourselves before we're willing to commit to purchasing it or trying it or whatever, we use a surrogate. And that's where ratings and reviews come into play. They are a surrogate for our experience. We go to Amazon and we look at the reviews. We go to Consumer Reports and we read what they have to say. Where we do trust the reviews, we'll go to. And so it's not that we have to know that person. We just have to have some inkling of identification with that person. So maybe it's their name, maybe it's their location, or maybe they say something in, well, I was with my 12-year-old son. Okay. I've got a connection to that person because I'm a parent too. So there's something in there of the reviews that we do trust. It's a psychological thing called surrogation, where we're using that surrogate experience to make a purchasing decision for ourselves. Now, sometimes we source the wrong information in terms of the wrong sources for reviews, and we can't really trust them. I mean, if you're trusting a bunch of people talking about a product in the comment section of a YouTube video, you're probably not getting real good, real good quality information there. But, if you go, to other sites that you do trust, Yelp, maybe you trust it, maybe you don't. Amazon, maybe a little bit more trustworthy. All depends on your experience. But we're using that concept of surrogation to help us make decisions.
Right. Because like you said, I don't have firsthand experience, but somebody who is similar to me has had, and we know that for the big sites, the Yelp, the Amazon, the Google, they, Facebook, all of those, you're going to see negative reviews there. And it's always a discussion I have with my clients when there's been a negative review, because of course their first thing is take it down. And I tell them, can't do that. But they're either on or off. So if I take that one down, they're all coming down. And I explain, it's supposed to be unbiased, so that's why we do that. And then I say we have to respond. We don't just ignore it. And so we, depending on who the client is, we've got some pretty standard answers that we give. But I tell them, and really, you're not responding for the person who wrote it. You're responding to everybody else who reads it, because
Exactly.
they want to see that, oh my gosh, they thought this was a problem. In all my years, I'm not sure I have ever had the original person who wrote the negative review respond.
Yeah.
And now, granted, I haven't had to do too many of these, which is good.
Yeah.
But yeah, they don't even read them, but it's for the follow-up people to see it.
That you're absolutely right. And what I've learned in my years of doing this, especially when I was at a place like Cafe Press, which is an online retailer that, lives and dies by reviews a lot of times, and probably 95% of the negative reviews are just trolls. They're just people being turds.
And they're written like it's Saturday at 1 a.m.
Right. And they're never, and they may have a genuine bad experience. You do need to respond to them. But again, as you said, Deb, the response is not for them. It's really for the people that are reading it. However, every now and then when they come back and they respond, what ends up happening is you're illustrating that you're providing really good customer service.
Right.
If the person continues to be a turd, everybody's going to think that person's a turd. I don't trust that review.
Right. And so the key is that you have to stay professional. If they call now, granted, there are some ways where you can have reviews taken down, especially bad language, some things like that. But yeah, if you don't ever want to stoop to their level, if you have kept it professional, then they do look like the turd, even if they never respond. But then hopefully you also get that other little thing that you mentioned, word of mouth, where your fans, your followers, the people who love you respond. And that comes back to you believe the total strangers before you believe the ad. I'm like, yeah, they're going to believe that we're saying, well, we're sorry this happened. But when somebody else says, oh my gosh, this is a great business, you're like, oh, okay, they must be.
And I've found that, even in the weird world of sports, if you go into the Facebook groups for sports teams and whatnot, if there's a negative Nancy that pops in there, there's 20 people who immediately follow up with, oh, shut it up, go somewhere else. You don't need to be in this group. So if you can manufacture that for your brand, if you have the types of customers that are passionate about you because of your product or because of your service or both, then you don't have to worry about negative reviews. They're going to help you out. It's going to be fun.
Right. And like you said, word of mouth is just so important because it is kind of the Joe on the street type of people saying things. And so you're much more likely to believe them.
That's absolutely true. And word of mouth is one of those things that, influencer marketing is an extension of word of mouth. It's a little nuanced. It's a little different because it's tied to the internet, which word of mouth isn't necessarily. And I did a very intentional thing when I was writing the section of the book on word of mouth. I interviewed 3 different people specifically for that chapter. One of them was Ted Wright, a fellow Georgian, a fellow Atlanta onion.
Had him on the program.
There you go. So Ted Wright at Fizz, who is probably responsible for about 50% of the top 10 or 15 great case studies in word of mouth marketing. They do a fantastic job. Then I interviewed Gino Church, formerly of Brains on Fire. Now he's with a firm called The Shared Ship. And he is a word of mouth Hall of Famer, like Ted, and has been involved in WOM for forever. And then I interviewed a young lady by the name of Christy Samus. And Christy Samus runs an agency in San Francisco called Clever. And she was one of the originators of the Walmart Moms program back in the day. So she's been a part of this influence marketing world for a long time. And I interviewed the 3 of them intentionally because I really wanted to sort of vet this idea of influence marketing rather than influencer marketing against what word of mouth is. And I think you'll see in that chapter in the book, if you read it, that we have this conversation where I almost get Ted Wright to admit that influencer marketing is word of mouth marketing. Almost, not quite, but almost. I've subsequently followed up and had him on my show, on my podcast, and drilled him a little bit deeper.
Right.
And he won't completely admit it because
he's
so passionate and so much of a diehard purist about word of mouth marketing. He doesn't want to let it go. But he did say at one point on my show, he was like, "Daggone it, Jason Falls, you came up with a better way of framing this in a lot of ways. Because if you look at it in that lens of influence marketing rather than influencer marketing, and you do open up those horizons for what it is, it does look a lot like word of mouth. It's a lot like that."
Right. One of the other things that I was looking at recently was, as we are recording this, the Oscars just happened. And so I happened to see a thing that was talking about the swag bags and what they get. And, it was just like, oh my gosh. And so now the one thing that I was curious about was who got them, because the value of the swag bags this year, the value, $205,000 each. And so of course I'm thinking, okay, did the people nominated for best costume design and Sir Anthony Hopkins also get no, they didn't. It's just the best actor, actress, and director are the only ones that get these swag bags. But I mean, there's some silly stuff in there, but there's way cool stuff. But of course, all of the people who are contributing things for these bags are hoping that those who get them comment about them. And it's the same thing as when we used to go to conferences and you get swag bags, right? You take them out and you lay them all out and you go, oh, look at this. You see the negative things happen with, say, NCAA basketball. I'm a huge college sports fan, and it really now I've known for years that women's sports don't get the priority that men's sports do. So many reasons for that.
Right.
Do I like it? No. But when you compared the swag bags for the players, and the men covered the bed with everything they got, and women got like 5 things, that might have been really cool, 5 things. But those poor people who donated those 5 things got absolutely no coverage. And so swag bags, I mean, it's just interesting when you're giving things for people to try. That one really backfired.
Yeah, I definitely think that was, sort of poor. And the NCAA had a lot of issues, gender equity issues with this year's
and I mean,
tournament.
It was just such a weird year, but there's only so many things we can blame on COVID.
Well, little do you or your listeners probably know, but I spent 15 years in college athletics before I did this whole digital marketing thing, and I grew up in the era of Title IX and gender equity being, in
when
the
it first started
forefront.
coming about,
right? And I have a tendency to look at things like that and say, yeah, there's still a lot to be done. There's still a lot of progress to be made. And I don't necessarily have a great solution for it. But I think if I'm talking about swag bags to a client, I would say to them, look, I'm okay if you want to participate in swag bags, but the money that you're going to invest or the amount of product that you're going to invest in these swag bags, I can do a much better job of targeting NCAA women's basketball stars who are very active on social media and finding a compliant way within the NCAA rules to gift those individual people something so that they do something because they have a higher likelihood of doing something with your product rather than putting it in a swag bag and hoping they do. The gamble that you take there, let's take the Oscars, for instance. I know that Sir Anthony Hopkins does, some things on social media, but it's normally involved with his painting and whatnot.
Right.
He doesn't endorse products.
He's not going to say, hey, look at this cool thing I got.
The most you'll get with him is he might, you might be able to see the bottle of wine he's drinking from in the background, perhaps. But you get if he wins the best actor, which I guess he did this year, you're your SOL. You're not going to, none of those products are going to surface on his. But if a younger actor who's really active on social media gets it, now all of a sudden you've got a chance. You don't have a guarantee, you got a chance. I think you're much better spent and much better served by going through the official channels and saying, hey, we would like to gift this, to talk to their management team. We'd like to gift this celebrity this thing. Would we be able to do that? And would they potentially post about it on social media if they like it? That's a much better approach. And you're probably going to get a lot more out of it, especially because you're controlling who you're asking to do that with.
Right.
I mentioned earlier, I work in the spirits industry. one of my creative directors one time said, I would love it. This brand, it would be great if somebody like Bradley Cooper, where we had a photograph of him, drinking a cocktail with this. Well, I reached out to Bradley Cooper's management team and they said, Bradley Cooper doesn't drink. And I'm like, okay, well, then
yeah. I mean, and there's
we'll
no getting around that. I mean,
yeah, that's just not, it's not going to happen. It doesn't matter how much we pay him. And even if he did do it for money, it would be disingenuous because somewhere somebody knows he doesn't drink. Right. So you still, I think you're much better served instead of kind of rolling the dice with something like a swag bag. I think you're much better served at really targeting who it is that you want to reach out to. Perfect example. The Sazerac family of bourbons is who we work with. We reached out this past year. The brand team reached out to Chris Stapleton, the country music singer, and because we know that he loves E.H. Taylor bourbon, and E.H. Taylor bourbon is one of those things that he's said before. We have gifted him some bottles before and knew that he liked it. Well, we reached out to him and said, why don't we do something really nice for you, but also for charity? And let's do a single barrel select, a barrel of E.H. Taylor bourbon and auction off the bottles, and the proceeds would go to charity. Well, now all of a sudden we've had 2 or 3 months worth of publicity with Chris Stapleton all over the place talking about E.H. Taylor bourbon. So again, being a lot more targeted with who you're trying to reach out to is, I think, much more effective in the long run.
Right. Well, and it comes down to being observant, and monitoring things. I mean, whether you're monitoring social media posts or things like that. I mean, clearly one of the things that you could be watching would be, which t-shirts are country music stars wearing? Are they wearing a branded t-shirt for one of your products? Okay, they did. Well, why'd they wear that? Was it just somebody gave it to them, or, hey, they actually really like that? We see things like that happen all the time. The small business, they see the person who posts about them on Amazon. They see the person who, they're a restaurant and they've consistently got, Mr. and Mrs. Smith who come in every Friday and write a Facebook post about it. Those are the people that you want to talk to, at least approach. They might go, this sounds like something else, but like the swag bags for the Oscars. I mean, they had concierge vitamin therapy for hangovers, a 24 karat vape pen. Okay. Right. And I love this one. Liposuction sessions for, and then in quotes, celebrity arms. So you might have just offended a whole heck of a lot of people with some of these things. But if you have found, okay, well, this person has been exercising and trying to lose weight okay, maybe that's the person that you want to go after for the liposuction. Maybe not. But yeah, just monitor those things, whether you're a local brand or, a big national, international brand. That's where you find those people who already like you and love you. Why not nurture those relationships?
Absolutely. And if you have, especially if you're a small business, local business, we've got a young lady here in Lexington, Kentucky named Renetta Davis, who's doing a great job of on Instagram of showing off fashion and accessories that she, partners with local stores, retailers, clothiers and whatnot. Well, I don't make, dresses per se or blouses for women, but maybe I make handbags, or maybe I make jewelry, or maybe I am a spa owner. I could reach out to her and say, hey, I love what you're doing on Instagram. I just, out of appreciation, I'd love to have you to the spa and we'll treat you to a day. There's a good chance she's going to post about it. And that's going to be organic. You're not going to have to pay for it other than give her the spa treatment. And then you start the conversation with her on a relationship that, well, maybe there's something more that can come out of this. And that's a great way to kind of start that relationship with someone like that.
Right. And of course, the big thing is stop worrying about numbers, folks. Having, somebody who has 2 million followers post on their Instagram account may mean nothing, but having somebody who has 200 of the right people read about you on Facebook, that's where the value comes in.
Yeah. And I would add to that, I'll give you an example. So let's say that you are a bank or a financial services company and you're selling annuities. And so you need, you need to sell basically $500,000 or more annuities in the next 6 months in order to make your margins or whatever you need to do. Right. Well, why in the world would you care about someone who has 2 million followers on Instagram or 100,000 subscribers on YouTube? Why don't you find someone who has a couple hundred high net worth individuals who pay attention to their podcast or
Right.
something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you need to go. It's not a numbers game. It's the efficiency of it all. And so, like, for instance, I wrote a book about influencer marketing. Joe Rogan's podcast doesn't do me any good.
No.
I mean, yeah, it'd be great if I were on there. I'd probably sell a ton of copies,
Right.
but his audience is not marketers. It's not agency people. Yeah, there might be a few in there, but that doesn't make any sense for me. What I need to do is talk to someone like Deb Cryer, who's talking to you, who's a much more relevant audience.
Right. Speaking of that, oh my gosh, we are almost at the top of the hour. I'm going to show the book again. And for those who are listening, it's called Winfluence. I have to stop and look at it. Reframing Influencer Marketing to Ignite Your Brand. The nice thing about it is tons of technique, and steps that you need to take and the things that you need to consider. Again, whether you're a big brand or, the little guy who offers the heating pad for sale on it's such great information, but for people who might actually want to work with you, contact you directly, Jason, how do they do that?
Jason Falls everywhere. There's a politician in North Carolina with the same name who hates me because I own the first 5 pages of Google. So I'm easy to find. I'm at Jason Falls on all the social networks. JasonFalls.com is a great place to find the podcasts and the books. Real easy place. And that's pretty much it. Just Google me. I'm there.
Perfect. I love it. And of course, what we're talking about is when you have good influence, you have winfluence. Such a segue. Don't you love it? Well, this really has been wonderful. We have to do it more than every, let's see, what would that be? 7 years?
Yeah.
And so we will definitely have you on, sooner than that. So that means you just have to write another book or something.
I'll get on that.
Yep. But, what final thoughts do you have for everyone?
Well, I just would love everyone to just think about what you're doing with influencers. It's a very effective and a very efficient way to reach audiences, especially if you really think about it strategically and pick the right influencers. And don't believe the mainstream media. The mainstream media likes to report, rubbernecking controversy type stuff. They're only going to talk about influencer marketing when someone does something stupid or there's some sort of statistic that says people are fraudulent. About 80 to 85% of the world of influencers out there are incredible content creators who can create content alongside you, can create content for you, and they also have audiences that might be very relevant to your audience. So give it a thought. Try to find someone out there who makes sense for you, whose feed you like and aligns with your brand, and just start the conversation. It's a great way to get started and build your confidence in the practice, because I have a feeling this practice isn't going to go away anytime soon, and it's going to be really effective and a better way to spend your money than a lot of other channels. So give it a thought, give it a shot, read the book, and I'd love your feedback on it.
Perfect. I love it. Well, this has been a delightful conversation. Can't wait to do it again. I'm Deb Cryer. I've been talking with Jason Falls, and until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Cryer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.